A lot of us have been feeling, but maybe haven't quite known how to talk about. Everywhere you look right now, people are talking about this massive loneliness epidemic. We're constantly hearing that we're more isolated than ever before, but what if your experience is actually the exact opposite? What if you've recently started kind of cutting certain people out of your life, and the craziest part is how you feel afterward? You don't feel guilty, you don't feel regret, you just feel relieved. It's this strange, profound peace, like a blaring alarm in your head has finally just been switched off. So why exactly does that happen? Let's unpack the fascinating psychology behind it.
Okay, let's dive into this, because there is a massive gap between how society judges you and what's actually going on inside your brain. The societal myth, well, it's pretty harsh. People might call you cold or say you're isolating yourself and ruining your own relationships, but the psychological reality is actually completely different, and honestly, it's brilliant. You are protecting your nervous system. Distancing yourself isn't some character flaw, it's literally a profound survival mechanism. You're not running away at all, you're just finally seeing things clearly.
Because let's be real, you didn't just wake up randomly one Tuesday morning and decide to turn your back on everyone. Not at all. You woke up after many, many years of completely overextending yourself. Just think about it for a second. You used to be the 3 a.m. friend, right? You were the one sitting on the phone for hours, just absorbing everyone else's drama, listening to them cry about their ex, complain about their boss, vent about how unfair the world was. You absorbed all that energy, gave unconditional advice, and tried to fix everything. But then, the moment your own life hit a wall and you actually needed a shoulder to lean on, you looked around and realized the room was completely empty.
And what you experienced in that crushing moment of emptiness actually has a clinical name. It's called compassion fatigue. You can think of it like an emotional burnout that comes from constantly empathizing and dealing with other people's pain. Originally, psychologists only used this term for healthcare workers and therapists, people exposed to trauma all day long. But it perfectly describes why your personal system finally just shut down. Your energy tank didn't empty itself overnight. It was drained, drop by drop, through thousands of moments where you put someone else's needs before your own. So you didn't step back because you're hateful, you stepped back because your emotional tank was just utterly depleted.
To really grasp the mechanics of this exhaustion, though, we need to look at the neuroscience. Enter polyvagal theory, developed by Dr. Stephen Porges. This theory shows that our nervous system is constantly running in the background, scanning our environment and asking one crucial question: is this place safe or not? When you feel safe, your brain naturally wants to connect and open up. But when you're constantly flooded with signals of stress or disappointment, or that feeling of being used, your nervous system literally flips a switch. It shifts into a protective state just to conserve whatever emotional energy you have left. It's your biology telling you to retreat so you can survive. But why is your nervous system so much more sensitive to these red flags than someone else's?
Well, that brings us to Section 1, the childhood blueprint, or where it all began.
To answer that question, we kind of have to travel back in time. It all goes back to your childhood roots. Imagine growing up in an unstable environment where the atmosphere was always tense. Maybe there were doors slamming or just this heavy, uncomfortable silence hanging in the air. Well, you had to adapt to survive that. You couldn't fight back, so you developed this superpower. You learned how to read the room. You could spot the absolute slightest shift in an adult's mood. Pioneers like John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth call this attachment theory. It basically explains how growing up around all that unpredictable conflict forced you to mature way too early. You learned to push your own feelings totally aside just to keep the peace and stabilize the adults around you.
And because of that early programming, your brain evolved into this highly sensitive social alert system. See, the human brain works a lot like a giant prediction machine. It's incredibly good at collecting data and spotting patterns. If you dealt with emotional stress early on, the parts of your brain that detect danger and read emotional cues, they react way faster than average. Essentially, you've spent your entire life collecting data on how human beings behave. You are an absolute master at predicting what someone is going to do next.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how your brain instantly applies that prediction system to toxic behaviors in adulthood. Think about these repeating patterns. We're talking about apologies that never actually come with real change, or compliments that are secretly just Trojan horses for a favor, or even those cycles where someone love bombs you with intense attention and then just suddenly vanishes the next day. When these things happen, your brain doesn't see them as isolated events. It sees a movie you've already watched 100 times. Your brain predicts the outcome isn't going to change, and that is exactly when your self-protection instinct kicks in and says, nope, we are stepping out of this loop.
Which leads us to Section 2, boundaries versus walls. You're not broken, you're just selective.
Now, the second you step out of that toxic loop, the critics get really loud. People will accuse you of being extreme or say you're building walls. But let's look at this powerful quote from our source material. A wall is built from fear. It traps you inside the darkness. Think about it. A wall is totally blind. It blocks absolutely everyone out. The good, the bad, the loving, the toxic. It's a massive structure born out of sheer panic, and ultimately, it just leaves you trapped and isolated in the dark. But here's the thing. That is not what you're doing.
You aren't building a wall, you're setting a boundary. And there's a huge difference. While a wall is blind and built from fear, a boundary is built from self-respect. It's more like a solid door with a good lock and a peephole. It is highly selective. You're still letting people in, right? You still have those one or two amazing friends who actually bring warmth and sincerity to your life. You're just keeping the toxic people outside. Leaving someone on the other side of the door doesn't mean you hate humanity. It literally just means you love yourself enough to stop letting people dump their emotional trash into your peaceful living room.
And once you start setting those boundaries, you uncover this beautiful truth that society just gets completely backward. People massively confuse true loneliness with simply being alone. True loneliness? That's standing in the middle of a loud, packed party, completely surrounded by people but feeling utterly unseen, disconnected, and out of place. It's that empty feeling right in the middle of all the noise. On the flip side, sitting alone in a quiet room, making a cup of tea, reading a book, and feeling this deep, profound peace with zero demands on your energy, that is absolutely not loneliness.
In fact, psychologists have a name for that peaceful state. They call it constructive solitude. Based on self-determination theory, when being alone is a voluntary choice, it basically acts as a powerful emotional detox. It strengthens your self-awareness and drastically cuts down on social pressure. So you aren't hiding away in some dark corner because you're scared. Actually, scratch that. It's more like you are actively, healthily recharging your batteries in your own sacred space. You're returning to yourself.
And as you spend more time in this solitude, a massive psychological shift starts to happen. In the past, you were probably stuck constantly making excuses for bad behavior, right? Searching for reasons why someone hurt you and giving them endless second, third, and fourth chances. But in the quiet, you finally realize something crucial. People show you exactly who they are through their actions, and especially through how they treat your new boundaries. Most importantly, you completely stop trying to fix things that were never your responsibility in the first place. You stop over-explaining yourself, and you just start observing.
Which brings us to Section 3, a peaceful, smaller circle. Removing the noise to keep what truly matters. This really is the ultimate realization of this whole journey. Growing up isn't about collecting this massive, exhausting network of acquaintances. It's fundamentally about removing the background noise and recognizing who actually deserves to stay in your life. I want you to really let this quote sink in for a second. Life is not measured by the number of people around you, but by how safe you feel when you are with them. Having a shrinking contact list isn't a sign of failure at all. If those few people left in your circle make you feel heard, respected, and totally safe without demanding that you constantly explain yourself, then you haven't lost a thing. You've leveled up. You've matured. You are finally prioritizing the absolute quality of your connections over the sheer, exhausting quantity. So, I want to leave you with this provocative question to reflect on today. Who truly deserves to stay in your peaceful circle? Take a real look at your life and your relationships, but do it through the lens of your nervous system this time. Remember, you aren't cold and you definitely aren't broken. You are just finally learning how to protect your peace. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep on.